Hi, Brenda Luther here with a quick webinar on how research questions in your review of literature moves to your research proposals. That's me on webcam. I'm going to take that off so you can see something more important, which are my slides. So you have finished your research proposal or review on your topic, and now you're going to move to, I have to double check and make sure that my camera's off. Sorry about that. I hope it is. Your research questions state what you intend to inquire, to measure, to look at. So let's look at the definition of that statement of what you intend to acquire, and here's some examples. What are perceptions of families related to their child's disability and their ability to be active, or how are children with physical activities able to be physically active? If you have a descriptive study, you only have research questions. You don't have a hypothesis because you're not testing statistically significant groups to tell if they're different. So hypothesis is when you're going to predict something you're going to discover. And that means you have to do inferential statistics such as t-tests or correlation. So if you're doing a descriptive study, you only have research questions. If you're doing an inferential study, you have a hypothesis. There are chapters on all these types of methods in Tappan, and you can read about them. But remember, the definition of a hypothesis is a statement of prediction of what you intend to discover. And some examples of that might be a directional hypothesis, where you are saying that you're going to discover something as a direction. So you're going to say kids with physical disabilities are less physically active than those without disabilities. You can see the two groups you're studying. First group would be the children with disabilities compared to the children without disabilities. This is an inferential statistic, and it's pretty rigorous to do. You have to statistically say that these groups are different. You can also have a non-directional hypothesis that just says they're different. These two groups are going to be different. So if you have a hypothesis or a research question, depends on your remaining questions. So what are those questions? Hopefully you developed those within SK2. If you have a hypothesis and you're going to do inferential stats, you're testing the difference between two groups. And your hypothesis wants to say what you think you're going to infer. What are you going to infer? That there is a difference and it's this is the difference, that would have a direction? Or non-directional, just saying I'm testing to see if there is a difference. It has no direction. This is a little graphic that's from your course of study. I know it probably doesn't come out real clear, but you can find this in research methods in our course of study of SQT2. And overall classifications of research methods, which you are going to describe in SK, is either quantitative or qualitative or mixed methods. There's chapters on all of these, and you can pick, depending on your question, what you think is best for you. So spend a bit of time reading about the difference between research questions and hypotheses. There's just a brief statement in Tappan, but it helps you. And then look at all the chapters, starting with the descriptives chapter and the further chapters that follow that are more inferential. So a tip now in your tasks are task 3 asks you for a hypothesis, but really they should say hypothesis or research questions. And so when you get to that point, remember that you either have one or the other. So now we think, how are we going to answer what our remaining questions are? You did the literature review. What method are you going to use to answer the questions that remain for you? That's what a research proposal is. And I say it's rather like a recipe because it's detailed enough that you could give it to me and I would go do it. I would go do your study just like you envisioned it because you told me everything in it. You told me each step of the way. And some recipes are rather simple, and they're well used, and they're adjusted, and they're flexible. Like this old donut recipe I found, you can see it's used because it's got grease stains on it, and you can see that the author has said, you can use 3 eggs or 2. I mean, she's obviously cutting the recipe in half. But that's what the proposal looks like that. So I would say, Brenda, you want to make 18 donuts? Here's the recipe. But if you only want 12, here's the recipe too. It gives me a step by step. This is rather simple, And really the methodology sections in research papers are rather simple. Some of them are more complex, and you start to learn it's complex by even its title. So Dave, this is a recipe I just copied off the net, but even Dave's name, I don't know what chana masala is. I know what masala is. I don't know what chana is. So I would think, well, I would have to do a little more investigation to know exactly what Dave wanted me to do in this study or this recipe. But is it really that simple? It really is. Scientific method is really about asking a question and formulating a hypothesis or a research question. And not necessarily, not every piece of research is experimental. Some of it's descriptive. Some of it just describes the phenomenon, so you don't really do an experiment. Typically in a master's class especially, we don't really do experimental studies. We just do descriptives kind of. But then we would collect data and we draw conclusions. So it really is just that simple. In the parts of Capstone, this is chapter 3. So if you've listened to other webinars, you'll know that I'm always telling you to head to the Capstone archives. Look at People's Chapter 3, the methods section, because you're going to see examples of exactly what you're writing. So at the end of a literature review, we usually say something like, based upon this review of literature, thus, the remaining questions are, based on the review of literature, the remaining hypothesis is to investigate X topic on this. So it's a nice segue into the next chapter and say, so this is how this question will be answered. This is the proposal to answer it. So remember, in SK2, all statements of your proposal are steps to answer your research questions or your hypothesis. So they everything hangs upon that literature review. And I think I have a repeat, or I'm going backwards here. So the proposed steps organizes on all your questions. Everything hangs off of what you want to answer. Everything, the overall method, quantitative or qualitative or mixed methods, the sample you're going to approach, the way you find your sample, anything you do that may affect your responses are things you want to organize on. So you're telling them clearly. And if you think about, in the end, you're giving me the piece of paper, and you're telling me what hospital to go to, what entrance to go to, what sample to approach, what survey to use, what the survey is going to look like, what the questions are, and how to analyze those questions. Then you start to get detailed, like that recipe analogy I gave you. So things you can answer, you can look at now before you start your proposal are, do I have my questions well developed enough that they're ready to even be answered? And can they be answered? And how complex are the answers going to be? Can they be answered in a survey that I just find out how many people say this, yes, no to this, or give a Likert scale impression? Is it a quantitative thing? Am I going to tally up the numbers of responses? Is that a quantitative study then? Or am I asking questions that are more open-ended? When the sample answers this question, are they going to have to give me paragraphs or sentences, more context, more qualitative kind of responses? And really, are these responses what I want to know that answer my question? And if you answer all those right, you say, well, who can I get to answer these questions? And logically, who can I even get as a master's student working within these institutions has a sample? So all these things kind of float together to tell you what your methods will be. So I'm going to review again, and this is kind of basics from our course of study, but let's remember quantitative methods are about using numbers to tally up something. You're either going to describe it or you're going to make inference about it. You're going to use inferential statistics to say one group is different than another. Quantitative methods are deductive, where we use a lot of data to narrow it down to say this is what this means. So deductive, it is an examination of what's possible, what might be true. You're using observations, you're using statistics to determine realities. You have a deductive quantitative approach, or you have an inductive qualitative approach where you more look at one little observation and you scrub through it so much and have it described so much that it grows into more of a statement of what it is. So when I say all this stuff and I talk about inductive and deductive, let's not really worry too much, because is anything really true? We're not going that far. We are saying this is the description of this sample, what we know right now. So nothing can really be proven or disproven. So if you see these words inductive and deductive, just kind of gloss over them and just remember your goals. Now let's remember qualitative methods are when we use words, text, narratives to describe a phenomenon or a relationship. It doesn't prove a relationship, it just describes it. It's not a test of statistical significance. You're not testing two groups. You're not using tests to say this group said this and this group said that and they're statistically different or they're statistically the same. And again, that word inductive I have to put in there, and I don't mean to confuse you with it, but it just means that you kind of see one phenomenon and you get a description from everybody around it, and you kind of grow it into more than what it looks like. I think that a master's project is best situated for descriptive methods, answering what's going on right now. It's rather a nod to nursing theory or nursing process, in that nursing process is really about accurate assessment. If we do an accurate assessment, we logically do accurate interventions more often. And so your phenomenon could benefit from having an accurate descriptive methodology. Now you can use both quantitative and qualitative. That's called mixed methods. Tappan has a beautiful chapter on this, so please head into there. And just as a reminder, remember inferential methods using t-tests or correlations or ANOVAs, all those higher levels of statistics require stats packages, usually, stats software, but they answer if it is statistically significant between or within groups, the variables that you pick to analyze. So if you don't have a stats package, you really, do you need that for descriptives? You really don't. What we describe in descriptives with the quantitatives are really the measures of central tendency that we all know, we all learned in math. Mean, median, mode, standard deviation. You can do charts and pie charts and box charts, and you can use all kinds of figures to describe, how many respondents do you had, how many said this, how many said that, what was the frequencies on this. Those are kind of nice descriptives. So for inferential statistics, do you need a software package? Well, I would need one, and I have I've done inferentials. Unless you can compute a t-test or correlations, Pearson's correlations on your own, you really would need to have a stats package. So now I have students say to me, what's the right way? And there's really no right answer. It depends on your questions and really what you want to know. So the right way should first be that you have clear questions, and then you think, how could I most easily answer this within my time frame of a capstone and my skills as a master's student? Asking what you should do really depends on you and your skill, your questions, your time, your institution. Sometimes hospitals will offer you help with running stats if you can do the measurements. And when you reach out to research groups in your hospital and your managers, sometimes you can move into more than you thought you could do. So it's time to explore and understand that. So if you say to me after this, and after doing the course of study, I don't understand how to write a proposal, I'm going to give you the best suggestion to do the course of study, to go back to the text, the learning activities, and step through it and just expose yourself to what a research proposal, what research methods look like. And then also, don't forget, head into that the Model Capstone Archives and look at other people's research methodologies, because you will see that that is where you are going to have a lot of examples on this. So reach out to the Theory Research Course Mentor Group team and contact us with questions. I hope this short webinar helped you with a few, and email if we can help.